Joining me now is Sports Illustrated senior writer Chris Mannix, kind enough to be on the program once again. Chris, want to hit a number of different topics with you, but let's start with USA basketball. Kevin Durant, with incredible performances that we've come to expect on this stage, is he the greatest player in the history of USA basketball?
I think he's got a really strong case because without Kevin Durant during this Olympic cycle, I think the U.S. would probably be where they were during the 2019 World Championships, right around 7th place. I mean, Durant has really pulled this team's fat out of the fire time and time again, including in the gold medal or the semifinal game, going into the gold medal game against Australia. Durant, during this cycle, has established himself as the leading scorer in men's USA basketball history. He's the only men's player to score more than 400 points during the Olympics. He is just racking up numbers. And if you look at the accolades he has team-wise, he's got 2 Olympic gold medals. He's got a shot now at a third. He's got a world championship medal from back in 2010. He's been the leading scorer on all 3 of his Olympic teams. He's just had a remarkable run over the last decade plus with USA basketball. So with respect to Michael Jordan, to LeBron James, to Carmelo Anthony, I would say yes, Kevin Durant is the greatest player in men's USA basketball history.
How do you assess the performance of the American team in this tournament? Because a lot of people heading in, when they saw some of the preliminary matches, dropping these games, chemistry issues, is the USA basketball, still on par with what we've seen in the past? It is a global game. How would you sort of assess what we've seen?
Well, it's about what I expected from a U.S. team that is playing without, some of the biggest stars in the NBA, most notably guys like LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Steph Curry, some of the very, very top guys that have been part of this program before. See, the challenge the U.S. team is always going to face is that the teams it plays against are going to have better chemistry and better continuity. And that is going to be able to close what is always going to be a big talent gap between the U.S. and everybody else. If you look at teams like Australia and Spain and Argentina, which just recently retired Luis Scola, who at 41 years old was still playing for the Argentinians, these guys have players that have been part of their programs for 2 or 3 Olympic cycles. For the most part, this U.S. team, outside of a couple of guys, they are relatively new to this Olympic stage. So it's been what I expected, the kind of grueling tournament I expected from the U.S. team. And fortunately, because of the play of Kevin Durant and some hot 3-point shooting, they've been able to get as far as they have.
What does the future of USA basketball look like when you think about Jerry Colangelo and his role there coming to an end?
Yeah, Jerry Colangelo, his run of 16 years atop USA basketball is done after this cycle. Jerry has done a remarkable job at rebuilding this program. When you think about where it was when he took over in 2005, bronze medal at the World Championships, 7th place finish at the 2002, bronze medal at the 2004 Olympics, 7th place finish at the 2002 World Championships. Jerry rebuilt this program into the dominant force on the international stage. But as it moves forward with Grant Hill at the top of it, one thing I think they need to focus on is doing what Jerry Colangelo did back in 2005, which is get guys to commit for 3 years. In 2005, Jerry got the core of the 2008 U.S. Olympic team to commit for international tournaments in 2006, 2007, and 2008. And during those off seasons, those NBA off seasons, those players were able to develop chemistry with each other, chemistry with the head coach, Mike Krzyzewski. I think that's something that Grant Hill needs to push for. Now, maybe you won't be able to get the 30-something stars to commit to your team, but you may be able to get guys like Zion Williamson or Cade Cunningham or some of the other guys that have been drafted early over the last couple of years. And if you can get them, even though they may not be as talented as some of the star players you'd be leaving behind, getting them all on the same page, getting them playing together, that might be your best shot at ensuring domination at these World Championships.
Because you mentioned Cade Cunningham, talking to Rod Beard out of Detroit earlier this week to kind of get a portrait of the kind of player he is, the kind of person he is, but I know that you're plugged into that organization as well. What do you think about Cade Cunningham and how high is his ceiling?
Cade Cunningham is excellent, terrific player at Oklahoma State. And he might have the highest floor of any player coming into the draft. I think Cade Cunningham is a can't miss as far as a frontline starter, maybe even an all-star in this league. But there was a lot of, let's say, arguments within that Detroit front office about who to take with that number 1 overall pick. Troy Weaver, who is one of the better talent evaluators as a general manager in the NBA, he calls the final shots. But there was a lot of discussion about Jalen Green, who has superstar kind of written all over him at the 2-guard position, about Evan Mobley, who's a unique player as a 7-footer who can kind of defend on the perimeter like a forward, shoot the 3 like a guard. He can do a lot of different things at that 4 or 5 position. So it's going to be really interesting to watch over the next 3 or 4 years to see how those 3 guys in particular develop. Do they all turn into stars? Or is one of those guys LeBron, like LeBron was in 2003? Is one of them Carmelo, like Carmelo was in that same draft? And if so, is there a Darko Milicic in that bunch, a guy that didn't work out at the top of the draft? So Cade Cunningham, I think, excellent prospect, but I think there's a possibility either Jalen Green, Evan Mobley, maybe even Jalen Suggs or Scotty Barnes turns out to be as good or better than.
Because you mentioned LeBron, let's switch gears and hit free agency real quick. What did you make of his comments on Twitter recently, sort of reigniting this narrative of, hey, keep chirping at us, keep talking to us, we're not going to be good, that sort of thing? I mean, we've seen this movie before from him, and the team went on to have success. Is this a replay of that narrative?
I think LeBron is always looking for ways to motivate himself and motivate his teammates. You mentioned we've seen this movie before. We have. It was just last year where he started using the hashtag Washed King, implying that people were calling him washed up. I don't know a single person that was calling him washed up, but whatever. Like, if he wants to use that as motivation, more power to him. And look, I think he's correct in that this Laker team has drawn some criticism and some questions about how they are going to come together, specifically with the addition of Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is a fantastic player, a future Hall of Famer, but he is not the kind of floor spacing guard that makes sense playing alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That's why so many people were a little bit surprised that the Lakers did not move ahead with a trade for Buddy Hield out of Sacramento and instead turned and pried Russell Westbrook loose from the Lakers. I think, this LA team, how they're coached and what positions these guys wind up playing is going to be key. I don't think they can play LeBron James at small forward, Anthony Davis at power forward, and some combination of Dwight Howard and Marc Gasol at the center. That just only leaves room for one player at that 2-guard spot to be the floor spacer. They've got some floor spacers there. Kent Bazemore can space the floor. Wayne Ellington can space the floor. Trevor Ariza can space the floor. Malik Monk, who they signed, just shot 40% from 3-point range. So they've got some guys that can play, but if you're determined to play a traditional 5 and play Russell Westbrook, it's going to limit the amount of opportunities those floor spacers have to get out there on the floor. So it will be pretty interesting to watch how this Laker team plays as a unit once the season starts.
You mentioned Russell Westbrook. Age didn't seem to be that big of a deterrent in terms of free agency. From the 30,000-foot view, what are some of your key takeaways from what was a pretty interesting free agency period?
Well, a lot of spending from a handful of teams at the top. The reshaping of the Laker roster with that Westbrook trade certainly is probably the most fascinating of the bunch. But I look to Miami as a team that made some interesting moves, spent a lot of money, but I'm not exactly sure how much better they got. Now, a lot of their money was spent internally. Duncan Robinson gets 5 years, $90 million, becomes the most lucrative contract for any player that did not go drafted in NBA history. So kudos to Duncan Robinson, and parents teach your kids how to be shooters. That's kind of the lesson to take away from that. Jimmy Butler gets a 4-year extension on top of his deal, and Kyle Lowry gets signed to a 3-year, $90 million contract. Now, Lowry is a world champion just a couple of years ago, still a guy who is at or close to the top of his game, but he'll be replacing Goran Dragic and Kendrick Nunn and some other guys in that rotation. And the Heat got good production out of those players over the last couple of years. And Lowry is a player who in his mid-30s has a lot of miles on his tires, plays the game kind of like a fullback out there, very physical player, draws a lot of charges. So his health is going to be questionable, or something to watch at least as this season, the next two move forward. So Miami certainly made a big splash with how much money they spent in free agency, but I'm still waiting to see how it comes together, to see how much better the Heat actually got.
All right, Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated. We'll leave it there. Thanks for being with us as always.
You got it.